So this is my car. It is known for two things: being very rusty and having electrical problems. So today we're going to fix some of the electrical problems. I'm having problems with my 2008 Pontiac Torrent once again. Now, I've actually put in a lot of work into it over the years, and it's just not having a good time. So this is actually a story of something that turned out to be a really simple fix, but because of the troubleshooting and diagnostics and some of the weird symptoms that it was having as a result of this issue, I had a heck of a time diagnosing it. I ended up taking it to a garage. So this is just a reminder, when it comes to working on cars, the diagnostics, troubleshooting, diagnosing the problem, figuring out what's going on so that you can fix it, is more than half the battle. So this all started when I went on a trip, and I was going to be gone for a couple weeks. Now, when you are not planning on driving a car for a long period of time, it's always a good idea to disconnect the battery. Now, when I say a long period of time, typically what I mean is a month or more. However, with my car, if I'm planning on leaving for more than a week, I need to disconnect the battery, because otherwise I'll come back to a dead battery. Well, I forgot to do that, and I came back and the battery was dead. That's no problem, I expected that, so I get out my portable jump pack and I hook it up and I jump start the car. No problem whatsoever. So I have the car on. Now, it's good whenever you jump start the car, you need to let the car run for like half an hour in order to have the alternator turning to fully charge up the battery. Otherwise, you'll jump start the car, remove the little helper pack, and then turn the car off. Your battery hasn't been charged, so now you need to jump start it again the next time you turn it on. So I go there, come back, and I think on the way back is the first time that the power steering randomly cut out. So my Pontiac has electronic power steering. So there's no power steering pump, no power steering fluid. It is all based on electronics. There's a control module and an electric motor that helps to turn the wheel. The bad thing about the electronic power steering is if the electronics in the vehicle fail, you don't have any power steering. Now, luckily, it's not steer-by-wire like you see in a lot of brand new vehicles, especially Teslas, where there's no physical connection between the steering wheel and the drive wheels. This has the steering shaft and everything, so it can still steer without power steering. It's just more difficult. So the power steering cut out, and I was like, that's weird, but it cut right back in, and so I didn't think too much of it. I figured, okay, the battery is just still having trouble, so I kept it running for a while to charge the battery up. Then I turned off my car. Next morning, I go to turn it on. It turns on just fine. But basically, this goes on for like another week, where the power steering will randomly cut out. My first thought was, oh, okay, maybe the battery's bad, maybe the alternator. I'll take it to O'Reilly's Auto Parts. They'll hook up a test thing to your battery, and they'll tell you if your battery's good, they'll tell you if your alternator's good. So I did that, and they said that the battery was low, it needed to be charged, but otherwise it was good. They said that the alternator back here was also good. So I take the battery in to get it charged, because it was easier to have them charge it than for me to do it myself. Plus, they charge it for free anyway, so they started charging it. And then they tell me, no, the battery's not good, it's got a bad cell. So I had to get a new battery. And I figured, okay, that should be the end of my problem, right? Nope, the problem with the power steering cutting in and out kept going. So during that time, I started monitoring the battery voltage and making sure that the battery voltage and the voltage with the alternator going was good. Normally, when the car is off, your battery should be 12.5 volts to 13.4 volts. That is a normal range of a fully charged battery. And then when you turn your car on, the alternator should now be providing a higher voltage than the battery did, so that it can charge the battery and supply all the electricity for all the other components in your car. And typically with the engine on, your alternator should be showing between 13 and 14.5 volts. That's the normal voltage range for the alternator. I found that when I was having issues, especially that power steering issue, when the power steering was cutting out, and the electronic brake booster as well, when I was having those issues and those systems were cutting out, the voltage that was displayed was 16 to 18 volts. It would spike all the way up to 18 point something volts. I discovered that the voltage on the alternator was spiking, and that was causing issues with all these other systems. I figured that my power steering module might be going out. You know, it's a computer module. Maybe that's just going bad. Eventually I realized that the reason why that was going bad was because of this problem with the alternator. I'm kind of out of my element when it comes to all of these electronic systems, and especially the computer-based systems. I mostly work on trucks and tractors from the 1940s and 50s. That is my bread and butter. I also do a lot of lawnmowers that are much simpler systems. I can do vehicle electronics, but when it comes to these digital systems with the computers and the different modules, I'm really out of my element. I knew that the alternator was probably an issue because of these high voltage spikes. That's probably messing with the other computer systems in the car. I knew for sure it was messing with the power steering module, and by this point the power steering would just cut out all the time. Basically I just had no power steering. I decided to take it to a mechanic so they could go through all the computer systems and they could tell me what damage has been done, what needs to be fixed. So the mechanic has my car for a week to figure out what the issue is, and then he tells me it's the alternator. Yep. So much for O'Reilly's free test equipment. But that is good news, I guess, because I can replace the alternator fairly easily. And this alternator that's on here, I replaced that back in like 2020, so it's still under warranty, so it's going to be free, so I'm pretty happy about that. Then I get to see whether the power steering system is actually fried, like it's not going to work at all anymore. I already have a replacement, so I could just put in the replacement, but I don't want to do that if I don't have to. It's possible that the power steering, the module and everything is still good, it just doesn't want to work when the voltage is too high. It might have like some sort of like internal circuit breaker that turns it off if the voltage is just too high in order to protect the system. So when I replace the alternator, the power steering might start working normally again. Who knows? Okay, the first step when you're doing anything electrical based. So the first step is to disconnect the battery. That way you don't have any voltage in the system. You don't want to electrocute yourself. It's not very fun. And really you only need to disconnect the positive terminal. The negative terminal can stay connected. See what I mean about this module being in the way? So now I have to put the battery box cover thing back over this and flop that over there to get it out of the way again. And now we just need to get this plastic cover off. We just unclip our exhaust gas recirculation valve, and then we remove the oil filler. Now this oil filler is actually supposed to be two pieces, so there's a cap that can come off, and then you can fill the oil from there, and then you have to unscrew this like base piece to get the cover off. But pretty much every time I've ever taken this off, the base piece comes off. So, and then this literally just clips in with these rubber mounts here. So it just yanks off. Throw that aside. So the first step is this tensioner, which you can only see the top of right down there. Basically, I need to stick a tool all the way down there to turn that tensioner to loosen the belt, then take the belt off of the alternator. Then it's just this one bolt here and then two bolts back here that are hard to get to. There's one right here in the front, one in the back, and then this will just come right off after disconnecting that right there and that nut right there. So really the only hard part, well, number one, getting the belt loose, and then getting those two bolts way in the back. Those are slightly annoying, but they're not impossible. And that's why I got this. So this belt tool is designed to fit down into that space. Okay, airbox off. Air filter. Yes, that is a brand new air filter from the last time I worked on this car. I like to keep a little tension on the belt to make sure it stays routed correctly. I'm just going to loosen this 15mm bolt right here. And then there's two bolts back here, one here that you can't really see, so I can also unplug. I'll unplug the alternator after I get those bolts loose. So we'll jump to when I get that done. Okay, so I got the bolt back over here out. I got this bolt completely out of the threads, but I can't take the bolt out. Fun fact, you can't remove that bolt. You might be able to, but it's really hard to remove or put in that bolt with the alternator in place. So what you need to do is you need to have that bolt in the hole in the alternator already when you put it in place, and then you can screw it in. And then when you go to take it out, you just have to remove this bolt and take the alternator out with that bolt just hanging there like it is. And then I took this bolt right here in front out, and now I can, ooh, ouch, take out the alternator. See, this bolt here is just too long, so you can't actually take it out in the car. So when I go to put the new alternator in, I'll have to put this bolt in and then put it in and tighten that bolt. That's just the way it is. It's been like a week, but I finally got the part. They had to order it, and it took quite a while. So when going to install the alternator, and I mentioned this when I took it out, but this first bolt here needs to go into that hole. This bolt we can get in no problem, but this one, if we don't have it in before we put the alternator in place, we aren't going to be able to get it in. And then it's just a matter of navigating the tight spaces of the sideways mounted engine. You'll also want to take your watch off, because it's just going to get caught. I've destroyed at least one watch and countless watch bands by getting it caught in tight spaces on engines. Okay, so I am trying to get the front part in to place. Might need a little bit of help. Then once that's in place, I like to thread this bolt through just to make sure I have that everything is lined up perfectly. So I just threaded that all the way in to where it's just starting to get tight, but it's still plenty loose enough that the alternator can pivot. Now I can focus on getting the bolt in back on. So a lot of the time it's best if you lift up on the alternator just a bit. It kind of relieves the pressure from that bolt back there and it makes it easier to go in. And then once it's I try and get it in as far as I can with my fingers before I go to the wrench. That way I make sure that it's not cross-threaded or anything. And then I'm going to thread this bolt in just to make sure that it can go in. I'm going to go ahead and put the belt back on. Now the slot on the tensioner down there that of course you can't really see, but the slot on the tensioner that this belt tool goes into is kind of worn out from years of using an improper tool to loosen this belt. So the belt tool just moves around too much, and so it's hard to push the belt tool back all the way and get the belt as loose as it should go. But I can get the belt loose enough to take it off of this idle pulley right here. And so, instead of trying to slip the belt back on this pulley, I take the belt off this pulley, slip it over this with the belt very loose, and then I slip it on the side of this idle pulley right here, and it makes the whole thing a lot easier. But anyway, the belt's back on. Now I just need to finish putting everything back together, and then the car should be done. After you install a new alternator, you need to have the car run, and you need to measure that voltage and make sure that the new alternator is actually working. And anytime you do something involving the serpentine belt, you need to run the engine for a while and then check for uneven belt wear. You need to make sure that the belt is running properly and it's not destroying itself. Now you may be wondering, hey, you had the belt off, why didn't you just replace the belt? And actually that's a question I've asked myself the last 4 times I've had to dig into that car's engine, is why don't I replace the serpentine belt? And the simple answer is you have to remove an engine mount to be able to replace the serpentine belt, and I just haven't felt like it. And then, of course, as soon as the alternator was replaced, it was putting out the normal voltage, and the power steering module started working, and all those weird electrical problems, or at least the weird electrical problems that were directly caused by the alternator problem, went away. There's still plenty of weird electrical problems still in the car, but the power steering was back. Now, if you want to see me dig into the engine of this Pontiac a little bit more, you can watch the video on the left. Or if you want to watch me work on old trucks, which is something that's more within my wheelhouse, you can see the video on the right.